All right, Caleb, I want to thank you for visiting with me today. And I kind of just wanted you to start by telling me who you are and what you're about.
So I'm Caleb. I currently I've grown up in a small town called Cedar City my whole life, but I've been through a lot. Just the general, so because I'm gonna go in more detail later. When I was young, I was adopted. At age 12, I was adopted. Before that, I was abused mentally, physically, and sexually of abuse. And then after I was adopted, I was mentally abused until I left at 19. That's just a general overview. But I'm currently married to my husband for in October it'll be 2 years. And then after that, I love being outdoors. I love enjoying um, hiking, being with my family most of the time, and I also really just enjoy my job that I have right now. It's a good paying job and just enjoying life.
That's great. That's great. So you said what time did you start? How old were you when you were in foster care?
When I started foster care and a half, because I was about 10 and a half years old, because I was in foster care for 18 months.
Okay.
Um,
And why were you
yeah,
taken away from your birth home?
I'm sorry. Did I, my end. Can you say that
Why were
again?
you why were you taken away from your birth home, if you don't mind?
So I was taken, I'll just start from the beginning. When I was young, before I was put into foster care, my parents weren't very good. They were toxic. They didn't love each other, and things started to get worse. The lack of care started to kick in, and we started to get abused by our dad and by our mom. Right before the divorce happened, there was a big fight. I remember that. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, we were taken out of the home and sent to the police office with my biological mom. And we had to talk about what was going on in the house. In the and we weren't allowed to go back to the house for 2 weeks. I didn't know exactly what was going on because I was only about 8 years old. The only thing
Mhm.
I know is I just wanted to go home. And and it was hard because looking back and knowing what exactly what was going on, that they were getting a divorce, and my father, my biological dad, had to need that 2 weeks to get his stuff out of the house, and we weren't allowed to be there because of the situation and how close we were. We couldn't be there, and for safety reasons. And then after my dad took everything out, we were back in the house. My mom was going through a lot. I won't expose her name or any of these names at all, but my biological mom, she was struggling and she wanted to be in a relationship. And for me, looking back, it was kind of like not the right time to be back in a relationship. She was going through a divorce, but she decided to dive right in, and this person took advantage and abused us too. I remember when we finally moved out of the house and sold the house, that we moved into this a complex. It was a rental home, and it was a nice home, but it was by the end of it, it was damaged badly. My mom's boyfriend abused us quite a bit and made us stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning playing board games. I remember one time he got pissed off at one of my little brothers and held him up by the neck. And I tried fighting him, and he punched me and kicked me in the leg. And I remember that bruise was pretty brutal. And they would threaten us not to say, because the DCFS workers would come and ask us if we were hurting each other, or we were getting hurt, not hurting each other. We were getting hurt at school privately away from parents, and we would get we would get threatened and lie about it until one day I decided to be like, yeah, we're getting hurt. I remember getting kicked in the leg, and I just broke down and told them everything on what's going on. And he really hurt us badly, and there was some very visual stuff that has happened um, that really hurt me quite a bit. But and the DCFS workers came over and saying, yeah, you're getting put into foster care. And when we were put into foster care, we were separated. I was with my twin sister. My younger sister was into a family, and my two younger brothers were in a separate family. And their stories are completely different than mine. But foster care,
So how did you
okay,
feel about being separated from your siblings?
it was hard. It was hard being separated from my siblings because I was at the age where I had to be responsible for them, and then being taken away from them was hard because that natural responsibility of taking care of them because our parents wouldn't take care of us. It was hard, but also like looking back at a perspective, it was the best decision for it to happen with us. But
To
during
be
that
separated.
time, it was hard, and I
Yeah.
wanted to be with my family, and I couldn't visit my siblings all the time. Um, During foster care, when I first came in, this was the first time I really like remember a lot of the stuff, because when I was abused before, my mind, I realized that trauma and all that stuff kind of gets erased out of your mind. So I remember a few things that has happened when I was little, but I don't remember the whole thing over and very well detailed, and I just don't want to be filling things in. So that's the
Yeah.
reason why I wasn't very well detailed. But when I was in foster care, that's when I started to remember a lot of details, because that's when I realized things were going on and I was in a safe place.
So
Um,
when you were in foster care, was there therapy offered to you? What kind of resources were available to you to help you with what you were going through?
so there was therapy offered to me. I took advantage of the therapy, even though I didn't know exactly how to talk about my past and what has happened to me. And that took time because when I had to rely on myself, and I had to rely on making sure that my siblings were okay and that they weren't getting hurt. So, and I had to be the parent during that time. So it took time to build trust and really opening up to my therapist about things and how I was truly feeling. But when I finally did, it was really nice, and I was able to get some resources to be able to help manage my PTSD, depression, stress, and anxiety. That's what I have. That's what I've been diagnosed with. And even now today, I still struggle with it. But during foster care, that was one thing that was offered to me. Also, my foster parents were really good because they had several children before, and they know how to go through the situation. During foster care, there was a lot of things that happened that led to me and my twin being separated. Um, so the first thing is that my twin was trying to be a parent for me. It was really hard because she thought she was the boss, and when she
Right.
did something bad, like maybe I remember once she stole all the chocolate syrup out of the fridge and drank it, which that's pure sugar, and we're trying to get our teeth healthy because we didn't know how to brush our teeth. We didn't know how to wash our body or how to properly communicate, or even our education, our grades weren't good, and everything we had to learn it. And so it was hard. But during that time, she tried to be a parent over me and tried to control me. And so the courts decided to separate us when we went up for adoption after
Now, how
18
was
months.
that for you? So being
It was
separated from your twin,
mhm. It was hard, but I also kind of like was at the point where I'm like, I'm ready to be by myself. I'm ready
Okay.
to, I was 12 years old. And so, and even back then, I didn't know everything, and I still don't know everything today. But back then, when I was 12 years old, during those 18 months, I had to learn basic life stuff. I had to push myself in ways that I never thought of. And looking back at it, that was probably some of the hardest times I've ever went through. The abuse, everything that hurt me physically, mentally, emotionally before naturally was taken out of my mind because of the trauma and everything that was going on. I remember very visually going through that stuff, and it was hard, and being always being told what to do by an adult, and I had to trust even though I was scared I was going to get hurt, and I was scared that I was going to something was going to happen. I was going to get hurt physically, maybe punched or kicked, or and it was hard. But those were some of the best times because I learned that I can do things on my own and I can become a better person. When I
Right.
was 12 years old. But finding out that I wasn't going back to my mom, even though it was a big battle for 18 months, it was a battle. And but ultimately it came down that we were going to put into adoption, and it was hard. I saw her the last time, and before I couldn't see her anymore unless my adopted parents gave me permission to.
Hmm.
Um, and it was hard. And for me, it hurt because I wanted to be with my mom, who I trust, even though she has done some stuff, like maybe realizing that boyfriend should have been kicked out when that
Right.
first red flag she noticed, but she didn't notice it because she was dealing with the divorce. Um, there was
So
things
was
that I
your mom
was
abusive to you or just her boyfriend and your dad?
so
And
her
you can go
boyfriend.
in as much as you want to or as little as you want to, whatever you're
Oh yeah,
comfortable with.
oh yeah, for sure. So her boyfriend and my biological dad, they were the ones that were physically hurting each of us. She would go in a way in a stage where her mind shuts down and she can't take over the situation. And to be honest with you, I personally think she was getting abused too because she would shut down and not fight for us, for her children. And it made me
Right.
realize that she probably was getting hurt too, secretly behind our backs when we're not visually, when we don't see it. And
Right.
so I think that's part of the situation is the boyfriend and my dad were trying to like dominate and control every single one of us, and that include hurting us so that we feel scared. um but during foster care, finding out that like I wasn't going back to my mom, it was really hard. um it took me some time. It took me about a week to finally like really calm down, and when I finally did, I went back to school and I broke down to my teacher right behind her desk so none of the other students could see. And I just broke down and cried. Um, and this is how opportunities kind of opened up. Um, so my adopted mom worked in the same school as me. She was a special ed teacher over me, and she was also living in the same like ward out in Three Peaks, where we lived. Um, but coming to find out is that she couldn't have children. I'm explaining her side a little bit, and then I'll go to my side. So
Okay.
she couldn't have children, and she also has a hole in her heart. So she had some health defects when she was younger, and she was only supposed to survive until 8. But she's still alive, and she's still okay, and everything's going good. But it was hard for her, and when she found out that I was up for adoption, they took action. They only lived like 3 or 4 blocks away, so I would just walk over and go visit them. when after all the foster care classes and going through the process to be able to have me in their home, and that
Mhm.
I'm okay to be there and have the permission from the courts and stuff. And
Right.
so after a few weeks, I was approved to live in their home permanently. Um, during this and before adoption is even considered, we have to live there. I have to live there. We all have to be working well for 6 months.
6 months. Yep.
Um, looking back, I wish that my parents didn't take me on vacation and spoiled me the way they did. Because I probably would have had a different decision if they didn't do that,
Mm,
or
mhm.
if they didn't do that. Because there was a
Right.
lot of things that I've noticed when I was, because it's their choice as a parent and it's my choice as a child to be adopted.
Right.
We have to all agree, making sure that everything is okay and everything's solid and that I won't be going into another situation. During those 6 months, there was several fights. It was hard because I kind of didn't want to. I opened up to them about things, but they didn't feel like I was opening up enough, and they tried to control me and what they visioned me as what I'm supposed to do.
Can we go
And
into that a little bit? Because I think that is a common issue with people adopting foster children, especially older foster children. I feel like they kind of try to conform you to their beliefs and their way of thinking. And if that doesn't happen, then that's an issue. And that's when kids are rehomed or treated badly, abused, whatever. So what do you mean? Can you go a little farther into detail about what you just had said?
yeah, for sure. So one thing that they visioned me was doing football. I hated football. I had no desire to do it. I was a water kid. I wanted to swim. I wanted to do water polo. I also was kind of into soccer, so I wanted to do soccer. But they had this vision for me, and it was hard. They wanted me to get married in a temple. My parents were LDS. They wanted me to get married in a temple with a woman. They wanted me to serve a mission. They were expected me to have high grades all the time, like A's and B's all the time, even though like that's really good and really successful, but at the same time you're naturally going to have hard classes and you're just going to try your best, and they didn't understand that, and so they would mentally abuse me and tell me I was worthless, that I'm blurting out the word because anyone could see this. I'm blurting out the word, but they told me things that were hurtful, and when I failed at their vision of me, they would tell I was worthless, and they told me I can never be trusted, and that at points it did start getting physical. My adopted mom would start to attack me and I had to defend for myself, and then things will just escalate more because my PTSD will kick in because of being abused, and I will
Right.
shut down and I don't want to deal with this situation, and it just de-escalates really 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 quickly, and it's scary. And that's what things will happen when you have a vision for your child and you expect them to do something. And that they
I
have.
often think that adoptive parents and foster parents don't realize that just to go to school takes a lot out of a child that doesn't know what lies in store for them when they've had their whole life
Mhm,
ripped out from underneath them. Grades are the last thing they are
mhm.
thinking about. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really big thing that adoptive parents need to realize is when you are taken from the only thing you know, it for their selfish reasons, putting so much pressure on a child that has lost everything is just ridiculous. And I don't think they realize,
Mhm.
a lot of adoptive parents, that that is a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And like some situations, like they were pushing me, but other situations, they expected me to be this person and I didn't want to be it. And my parents were LDS. I was LDS. My parents are actually still LDS, my adopted parents. Um, But at age 14, I came out as gay. And that was the hardest situation because I told my parents that I was gay and I was very vulnerable and I was about ready to break down. And guess what? That for all your parents out there who has a son or a daughter, whoever is questioning their sexuality and they come to you and talk to you about it, always, always, always come with love, but also don't force it on
Right.
them
Right.
because they're going through their own things. You don't know their whole situation. And that's what I didn't get. My parents told me that I was LDS, and my parents completely broke down, went to the bishop and said, oh, he's having questions about being gay, and I had to talk to my bishop. And I felt like I was worthless. That I
Right.
opened up to my parents and tried to let them in, and it was hard. And so I shut everything out until I was 19. Actually, until I was serving a mission, which is down the road. But during
Okay.
that time where I was closed or in the closet and didn't want to open up, I lived an LES lifestyle and I tried my best. During that time, I got super depressed. I wanted to be done with my life. I became suicidal, but I was obedient to my parents to make sure that they're happy because no matter what, I was worthless and I was a piece of beep. And I
Right.
couldn't be trusted. So I just learned to just be submissive and had to do the things to in order to survive and not get hurt. As
Right.
not get hurt or not get hurt as bad in a
Right.
way. And so during those 18 years, I did everything I could to just be submissive. And when I graduated, I decided to choose to serve a mission.
Now,
And
were you pressured by your parents, or what was your thought process for that?
yes, and that's what I'm going to go into.
Mm-hmm.
So people in the outside world think that I am a worthy LDS person. I am worthy to serve a mission. And that was the next step that they expected me to do.
Right.
That was my, that's what I did because they expected me to do it. And it messed me up a little bit in the long run. Like I didn't apply to colleges, which I totally wish I could, and I still can now, but it'll be a different situation than
Right.
what I did before because schools pay for the applications and I didn't, and it was free. I should have applied
Right.
um, because I was serving a mission. Why should I go to college? That's still down the road. Um,
Mhm.
but during that decision making, I knew that I needed to go, but I also knew that I needed to make my parents happy. I didn't know the reason why I needed to go, and I didn't know the reason exactly why I needed to be in San Francisco Bay Area. um,
It was
as
also
a
just expected of you, right? As an
yeah,
18-year-old
yeah,
Mormon kid.
yeah,
Right.
and I saved money to go on it. Like a mission
Mhm.
isn't cheap. It's I think
Right.
$12,000 now, and probably because of inflation and everything, I'm pretty sure it increased even more, just to live in for 2 years out in somewhere and teaching about Jesus Christ and the gospel. Um, I during the MTC left my parents. I left my parents, but during the MTC I got strep throat, and that kind of offended me a little because when they were doing tests, they either told me that I have mono or that I have strep throat. That's one of the two things. And I didn't kiss any people because I was trying to make my parents' vision and being happy and making sure that they're happy. And I during the MTC, it was probably like I hated being sick. The beds are uncomfortable. I felt like I was in the army and it sucked. The food sucked, everything sucked, and you just it's just like you're trapped in like almost in 10 acres for 2 to 3 weeks. And sometimes if you're speaking another language, you're there for almost up to 10 weeks, over 3 months in the same area in Provo, right next to BYU. Like I remember it was 4th of July and we couldn't leave the area, and we just had to do our thing. And like, yeah, there was fireworks going on, but we had to ignore it, and it was hard because I wanted to celebrate. It was 4th of July, and
Right.
but I flew out to my mission. It was the first time being on an airplane, which was really cool. But I went out to the mission and I was in San Francisco. If all you know, it's the number one gay nation, or it's one of the top ones. There's a lot of gay people, there's a lot of influencers, and it's very, very, very diverse compared to Utah. Um, I loved being out there just to know that I get to be in a diverse area. But it it was
So
somehow
did the bishop know that you were gay at this time when you got sent on a mission?
no, not
No,
my
okay.
bishop, not my stake president. I closed it off. I was planning to take it to the grave. Like I don't care
But you
because of
haven't told your
how
parents? You did tell
what
your parents. You told your
I
parents you
did
were
tell
gay
my
when you were
parents at 14, and they
I
kind
just
of
find
thought
it
it was.
kind of ironic that you got sent to San Francisco of all places.
It's true. It's so true. And like when I told my parents, they acted in a way that I can't describe to you exactly what happened. But my mom was a narcissist, so she would try to gaslight me and try to make me get into these fighty moods, and she would blame it on me, on things that she messed up on too.
Right.
And it was hard. That was something that my adopted mom did, is she was a narcissist, and my dad was a person who was in the background and didn't really care. And my adopted dad, sorry, I need to get the right terms because people might get confused.
Yeah, it's kind of
But
confusing.
my adopted dad would just be in the background. He didn't really have much of a say in things. But when I was out in the mission, yes, I went knocking from door to door, talking about Jesus Christ and being part of the LDS church. Um, but there's a few things that got me through that time, because I got really depressed because I knew that this wasn't who I am. For months, I would pray and ask God, be like, figure out why am I gay? And why am I here? And what's my purpose in life? And I asked him every single day. And it was hard because for the first few months, I didn't get the answer. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to go to the Book of Mormon to find answers because that's what you're taught. And I
Right.
looked at the Book of Mormon. There's no information. And realizing reading the Book of Mormon and the Bible did not make sense. Yeah, it's about the ancient Americas, but doesn't make sense to anything else. And the Bible's really hard too because it's been translated several times. So how do I know if that's really true, and if they put something in that about homophobics, and that's why people are following this book and hold to be true? Like that doesn't make sense to me. And
Right.
so, and I really opened my heart, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not getting my answers. And so I kept praying and been diligent to find my answer on why am I gay, and should I marry a woman or a man? My patriarchal blessing said I should marry a woman and I'll have multiple children, and that we'll live a successful life and I'll have a successful career. Um, I know people are very private about their patriarchal blessings, but I am not part of the LDS church anymore. And so I'm open about it. I don't really respect it in a way. I still respect the LDS church, but I'm against some of the things, their teachings, and what they have taught me. And you'll find out why.
So I
So
think a
I,
big thing, I kind of want to interrupt. I think a big thing, I was raised in Utah too. I was adopted. And I feel like religious abuse is a thing. Like, I don't think it's talked
oh
about,
yeah,
but I think I was definitely religiously abused. And I think that is a lot of adopted children, children in general can be, severely religiously abused. And I think that's such a real thing.
Yeah. And like, and even the bigger thing that I've noticed that was a real eye opener is Utah is the words here are so judgy, and they try to be like, oh, I'm going to be the next primary president. Oh, I'm going to be the next bishop. Like they are eager to be in leadership, which is like exciting, but they also judge people and try to find out every single secret about a person. So it was really
Right.
hard to even talk about and feeling comfortable of being gay and trying to choose to live the LDS life because everyone was super, super, super judgy. And I was scared I was going to get hurt because I've already been hurt. And so when I was out on the mission, I kept that to myself. And that it was hard. I literally kept it to myself, even though I had a companion. I was there 24/7 with this person, even though there's been a few companions that were really hard to get along with. And it was hard because COVID-19 hit. I was out on the mission. I was in San Francisco and I was stuck in the same four walls with the same person. Imagine how toxic that is. Like, you can't even go outside and you're there and you have to read the Book of Mormon, the scriptures. There's no news and there's a budget. So you couldn't really go and like spend some unhealthy food. Like, even though like I still gained weight because of my mental health. I've gained about 50 pounds while I was out on the mission, actually almost 60. My clothes didn't fit me. I was miserable out there, especially when the pandemic hit. And I was in a really beautiful area. I was in Danville, California, and it's a rich area. I'm going to say that. It's a super rich area. A lot of famous people live there. And security's tight. And there's things that you see there that you don't even see in normal life, like crazy. And people would intentionally leave their bikes out in the middle of the road. Like it's a totally different lifestyle than being in Martinez where people get robbed all the time and it's very sketchy and a lot of people will be poor. But like during the mission, it was hard. But looking back after being out for almost 2 years, like being home, and the biggest thing is I am proud of my mission still. Even though I'm against the teachings and what I taught people and stuff like that, I'm still proud because I learned that I can make my own decisions and I can trust myself. Like that's something that was huge because I couldn't trust anybody, but I can at least trust myself. And so I became very independent and relying on me. When I need time away, I'm going to give myself time away. If I need some time to refresh myself, if I need to go and have some fun, I'm going to do that for myself. And a lot of people will be considered, oh, that's selfish. That's selfish. But when I was out on the journey, I realized that when I came home, there was a motto that I realized that I was doing out on a mission. But this motto is on a journey to becoming a better person, to become healed. I want to be healed from trauma that I've been through and stuff like that. So when I was out on the mission, I made my own decisions. And during that pandemic, it was March when we went into doors. I stayed out until September, which is about 5 months, about 5 to 6 months out there when I was in the pandemic, and it was a toxic environment. And I knew that I needed to come home. I got an answer that I needed to go home. First of all, the first answer that I got is I asked God, I was like, is this church even true? Because I broke down. I was like, you're not getting an answer on why I'm gay. You're not giving me an answer on what's my purpose. Is this church even true? And I got the answer, and the church is always against it, but I got an answer that this church wasn't true, that this wasn't for me. And so I knew I needed to go home and start moving on with my life. But it took me 5 months to get to that point because getting home from a mission is really hard. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going home and you're done. No, you have to go through your stake president, you have to go through your mission president, you have to go through your bishop, and you even have to go through your parents too. And we were all on the same phone call, and this is when I knew I was kind of done with the church when they were on the same phone call and talking about things that I did privately, like masturbating and stuff like that, and talking about things that were considered sins in the church in front of all these people that I don't really trust. And I already had trust issues because I was abused, and I knew that this wasn't here. But somehow I got through it. I got through it, and they're like, yeah, you're going to go home. And I still came home with honor just because of my mental health. I was actually with a therapist while I was out on the mission because I knew that I needed a therapist. I couldn't get through this without someone to vent to that I can kind of get some help from. And
Right.
she was there just to help me get through it. She wasn't there to give me the answers to questions about the church and stuff like that. Even though she was an LDS therapist, she was there to help me get through and some things to deal with. And I went on Zoloft. I became very suicidal on the mission. I wanted to kill myself. And I went on Zoloft, and that caused a lot of my weight gain. But and I was not happy. I was not smiling. I I I just wasn't there. And I actually got to the point where I literally didn't care who was there. I broke down and told them I wanted to go home, and it ended up being my companion. And so that's when I had the interviews and calls and making sure that this is my decision and that I might not be going home with honor. And what that means in the LDS church is if you don't serve a mission with honor, you can't become a bishop, you can't become in leadership. And there's a lot of pressure. Like I didn't know this until I came home after that there was a lot of pressure and the big things that in the LDS church that if you didn't come home early, you would have not served a mission with honor. But I was lucky. I still came home with honor, which I knew that like for me, it was like an accomplishment that I went out and I did what I had to do. But when I
Right.
came home, it was time for me to move on. When I came
And how did
home, it
your
was time for
adoptive
me.
parents react to that, to you coming home early from a mission?
Oh, they played a whole game. Oh my gosh. They supported me coming home. But I also told them when I'm coming home, I'm coming out. I'm gay. This isn't a phase, and I'm done playing your crap. That's basically
Right.
what I was done because I learned to make my own decisions, and I didn't care what they thought of when I was out in the mission. And one other thing before we move on, while I was out on the mission, I got in contact with my biological mom. It caused a lot of
Oh,
problems because my adopted mom was like, you shouldn't be in contact, and I don't give you permission. If you're in contact with your adopted mom, you won't be able to come home and you won't be able to be welcomed back home into this house. And I was 18 years old and I'm an adult. And by the time you're 18 years old, the courts are legal. You're considered an adult and you can make those own decisions. I followed my parents' rules until I became an adult. So when I was in
I
touch,
want to
I didn't,
interject here really quick.
yeah.
I just have something I want to say. I think that a lot of adoptive parents get jealous, right, of the
Mhm.
relationship between a biological mother and her child. And I think it causes a lot of issues rather than just loving the child and knowing where they come from and that they will always have a connection with that parent instead of shaming or punishing. I don't think necessarily you have to foster that because, sometimes
Mhm.
it's not healthy, but that's still where the child came from. And that's
Mhm.
always going to be a part of you. And I think if adoptive
Mhm.
parents can get on the same page with knowing, that's where my child comes from, that's his mother, then their relationship can be a lot better. The adopted child and the adopted
Mhm.
parent.
Yeah. And like, I wish I would have saw my adopted or my biological mom when I was a little kid, but my adopted parents chose no communication with my biological mom at all. But when I was on the mission, I was 18 years old, and legally I can get and communicate with my biological mom. And I knew I wanted to reach out and It was hard because my parents were severely mentally abusive against that thought of me being in contact with my biological mom. And it caused, when they found out, they threatened me, and I was like, okay, I won't keep in touch. And I kind of lied, but I still kept in touch with her. And I loved her because I was 12 years old when I was adopted. I knew what was going on. I knew who was my mom. I knew who was my dad. I was 12 years old and I knew what was going on. And I wish my parents would at least let me saw her or write letters to her or something, because it was
Mm.
hard. Right? And like it was hard to fully trust someone when they couldn't let me go back into the past life and work on things that has happened to me. And so it was
Which is
nice to be
all a
able to
part of
meet.
you. It's all a
Yeah.
part of you.
And they didn't
Yeah.
fully embrace that. And so,
Right.
but when I came home from the mission, I knew I needed to move on. And my parents were like, oh, we'll be supportive of you being gay. And if you don't go to church a few weeks, that's fine. But like, we recommend that you go and stuff like that. When I finally told them that I was talking to a guy, they literally lied to me about the whole thing, and it was complete game to them. They told me I had 24 hours to move out of the house. And I did. I moved in with my twin sister who had a place. And I was like, okay, well, I'll start getting on my feet. But I only had about 4 weeks, and that's not enough. And I was getting paid $12.50 an hour. And that's not enough income to get a room for rent and a down deposit, like, and to get on my feet. I didn't even have a car because during my high school years, I worked at Dairy Queen and saved all that money. And I even begged to have a yearbook for my senior year. I couldn't even do that. I couldn't pull money out. And that was only $60. I had over $5,000 in the bank account. And I came home and there was only $200. And so I was starting from bottom. And I
So
only
where
had
did that
about,
money go? To your mission, or did your parents, adoptive parents, take that out?
my adopted parents took that out. That's what I think. I don't know the definite answer, but apparently my dad got really sick and lost his job. My mom had to stay out to help support him for several months, and they were lying to me during that, like while I was out on the mission. So they're using that money probably not for just my mission to help pay, but they're also using it so they can use to have food and stuff, which kind of pissed me off because I hated them anyway, and my money was gone. It was hard and it sucked. And just warning you, like if you become 18, take your parents off the bank account so they don't have access to it.
Yeah.
If you feel responsible and if you know that you're independent and you want to get on your feet, take your parents off.
Right.
Because I lost all my money. I lost $5,000 and I worked all senior year. I was doing water polo. I was doing school. I only had 6 hours of sleep every single night. And I was pushing to have that money so I can have it for the future and to be able to
Right.
get like a vehicle or be able to have a place of my own. And it was hard. So, and I ended up homeless. It was probably the hardest time for me because I knew no one supported me and knew that I wasn't loved. And it was hard. I ended up being used. And so I was even more debt. I wasn't in debt when I left, but I ended up being in some debt. And I worked my butt off to get me out of debt. I am out of debt now. I'm in a very stable place now, but it was hard. And I realized that I had to do things on my own. And I was going through a lot of trauma. But um, Liz Porter, my brother's, or actually, you can probably bleep that out after.
Yeah.
But my uh my
She's my
brother's.
best friend, so I can use her name if I want to.
Okay, I just want to make sure because I don't want to expose anyone. This
Yeah,
is
she's okay.
my story, and it's my right to tell the story, but I don't want to expose anyone.
Right.
But she's my brother's adopted mom. And she found out, she actually ended up calling me, and I was at a homeless shelter. And she's like, what's going on? I was just checking on you, see if you're okay and stuff. And I told her, I was like, yeah, I'm homeless. I'm at the homeless shelter right now. And she's like, nope, you're coming here. Get your stuff, pack up. You're coming here. Get out of that place. And so I got out of it and went to her place because luckily I had a vehicle. It wasn't my vehicle and it wasn't the best vehicle. And it was my biological mom's vehicle that she's letting me use because she was a truck driver and the car needed to be driven while she's out. That's basically what the deal was. And I was paying for insurance on it and doing my own part. And so I luckily had a vehicle and I was working at Golden Corral and I literally was surviving off tips and it wasn't enough. But I ended up back into my brother's home so I can get on my feet. And during that time, I got an email from my adopted mom, not my brother's, my adopted mom. And this email was to the point where I was done with them. I chose to be done. This email described things that were not the best. Like I was expose it because she sent it on a school teacher email. She's a teacher. And this email saying I was a disgrace to the family. I wasn't holding up to their name and I should go legally change my name back to my biological name. And that I should, and basically getting down to the point that they were prideful and that I was a disgrace to the family. And it was very, very hurtful. Being
Mhm.
smart about it, it was a school email. It was her teacher email, and that's considered public. So I made it public. She almost lost her job because of it. And she had some consequences and some things to figure out with some parents because the parents found out and that
Right.
we had to deal with it because this
Good.
wasn't right. And
Mhm.
but I hope she learned her lesson that she shouldn't be sending that type of stuff because consequences will happen. And
Right. And it's so to your child. You're
yeah,
her kid.
she chose me and yet she despised me and she hurt me and she didn't probably even realize it. And I
Because you
told her
didn't
that,
fit her agenda. You didn't fit what she wanted you to be. When we
mhm,
can't do that as adoptive parents, we
mhm,
cannot do that to our adopted children. It will never work out.
it'll be a fail.
Yeah.
And they'll end up pushing the child that they brought into their home way even further. I still
Right.
don't really keep in touch with my adopted parents because it was so toxic and I was done because
Mm-hmm.
I was on a journey of becoming a better person and part of it was letting the toxic people go. So I was like, crap them and let them
No.
go. And so and I'm proud of it. I don't regret it. And I hope eventually they come back into my life, but when they come back into my life, we'll have boundaries and they know exactly what's to be expected. And if they break it, we're done.
Right.
Like, and me and my husband, we want to have children. We want to have solid jobs and a safe home. We want to have a mortgage, a place that we, it's our own and we can bring children in. And that's the reason why like I went to Encircle is because I want to eventually work on having a safe place for my children. I don't have, and one thing that is, I don't want to have a vision for them. I don't, like, yeah, I want to be able to help them make their own decisions and help them follow their dreams, but I don't expect anything from them.
Yeah.
If they want to go do sports, they can. If they want to be a complete computer nerd, they totally can. If they want to do whatever they want, we will support them and love them, and we will be there. Because when I was
Mm-hmm.
in high school, I did swim and water polo. Not once my parents supported me, even though they forced me to do an extracurricular activity after school. And part of it was probably because they didn't want to deal with me. But I had to pay for everything. I had to pay for the uniforms. I had to pay for the hotel trips and the food and stuff like that. And I did extra jobs because I didn't have a solid job then. I was just I tried to find the money in ways that was unique, and it was kind of hard, but
So let me interject. Weren't they getting money for taking care of you and adoption assistance? And you still had to pay for all of that yourself?
yep,
All of your extracurricular stuff? Okay.
yep, yep. And
Mhm.
it was hard. And my parents never showed up, never supported me, even though they forced me to do an extracurricular activity because I couldn't do football. I didn't want to do football.
Mhm.
Um, and it
So
was
did you
part
say
of
you
it.
have no contact now? Or you have some contact with your adoptive
Um,
parent?
I have contact with my dad, my adopted dad, and that contact is going to a public place and we talk for about an hour. And even then, and then like we don't talk to each other for a few weeks. And we talk over Messenger, so if something happens, I can just block. I have very strict boundaries, and I want to let my dad in a little bit more, but my adopted mom's the person who really has hurt me the most. And
Mhm.
I want to be able to set boundaries with them, and they also set boundaries with me, but not to the point where it was. And if it
Right.
doesn't work out, I can just leave because I'm an adult. I have my own place. I have my own car. I have my own jobs. I started from the ground up, earning my own stuff, and I'm very proud of it. And so
So what is your relationship like with your um, biological mother
we have
now?
no communication now. No communication.
You with your biological mother?
Oh, that's my adopted mom. My
Yeah.
biological mother is we do keep in touch and we do visit each other and we do spend time with each other. I love her. She loves me. And it's a mother-son relationship. And that's
Okay.
what I needed for a long time. And yeah, we both go through our own struggles and we know our boundaries and we respect that. And we talk to each other. And the biggest thing is communication, like with each other. And we have a strong relationship.
Right.
And we talk about the past sometimes. And when we're ready, like some things she hasn't talked to me about because she's still going through her own stuff and I'm going through my own stuff. But we
Right.
respect that and we don't force it on each other to be like, well, you have to talk about it because I want to understand. No, I'd be like, okay, when you feel comfortable talking about it, I would like to have this answered and would like to have this question answered. Um, so that's something is we do have a healthy relationship and
That's
I'm happy for it. I wish we would have had it.
well, sorry. How many foster homes were you in? Just the one and then you were adopted, or were you in several foster homes?
I was just the one and I was adopted.
Okay.
So
I just did have a couple more questions that I
yeah.
was just scrolling over. What advice would you give foster and adoptive parents to make it a better experience for the child? Do you have any advice?
Uh, the two biggest things is communication. I realized that part of the problems that come up is the lack of communication everyday life.
Right.
The other biggest thing is not having a vision for your child and forcing it on them.
Hmm. That was a
Because
big thing.
I bet you if my parents were more open and more not having a vision and being willing to be open with me, we would have a healthier relationship. But since they decided to have this vision of their child and what they're expected to do and being mentally abused by it, um, it got the consequence of not pushing them away. I chose
Right.
them. I chose to not have them in my life
Right.
because it was
Right.
unhealthy.
What would
Instead,
you want CPS workers to know? Did you have any issues with CPS workers? Do you feel like they took care of
no,
you and had your best interest? What would you want us CPS workers to know?
CPS workers is being very observant of the situation. Um, because I realized that I acted differently when I was nervous, when I was lying. They should be able to spot out when a child is lying and when they're nervous, and to be able to make them feel comfortable of talking
Mhm.
about it. Because I betcha, yeah, going to Disneyland and stuff was right before the adoption, but there were scenes that were hurtful. I felt like I couldn't trust my parents, and I felt like I couldn't open up to them, and right before adoption. And I bet you if I felt more comfortable and felt more open with my CPS worker and not being felt like I was being spoiled or being forced in this family, that it would have been a different situation. I probably would have been with a different family that's more
Mhm.
comfortable and more suitable for me. But I was having trust issues. And so the biggest thing is like, it was hard for me to open up. But for the CPS workers, is being observant of the child and the parents. And if
Mhm.
there's small things going on, maybe like a leg is tapping. Usually, like when there's a leg going up and down, like shaking like crazy, there's probably some anxiety in that person. Sometimes they do like a tap, or sometimes they like fiddles with their fingers, or they're kind of like trying to look away at the situation. Or do you get what I'm saying? Like there's small actions that you can see in a person that if they're not feeling comfortable. And so I wish because one thing that I did when I wasn't feeling comfortable is I tried to get out of the situation. So I would try to not talk. And so, and that was another big thing. Um, Advice to CPS workers: if the child's trying to get out of the situation, you know that there's something wrong. They're not feeling comfortable here, and probably being considered trying a different family. Because I was not strong enough to say I wanted to go to a different family, because they took me to Disneyland. I didn't want to hurt them, and
Mhm.
before I was even adopted, and it was hard. Like I didn't want to hurt them because they spent so much money on me, because I knew what money was, and it was expensive. And so I didn't want to hurt them, because I was worried if I hurt them, I would be hurt back. And so I can't give a definite answer. Like I've given a few things, but like I wish I was in a better situation. But I also learned from the situation that I was
Right.
in. And
So, what
so
advice do you have any advice that you would give to a foster or adopted child that is going through similar things that you have gone through?
um the biggest thing is that it's hard, because I tried it and I was hurt. But trying to open up with the parents that you're with,
Right.
because they can help you. They're always there they're there more than as a CPS worker, a therapist. They see what your actions are. They see, because you're there and they have to be there. So opening up with your foster parents and your adopted parents. If they hurt you in any way, shape, or form, that's when you need to tell the CPS.
Right.
Um, and that's very, very simplistic, and anything can happen. If you didn't feel comfortable, still tell the CPS worker. If they didn't hurt you, still tell the CPS worker, because there might be in a miscommunication. They might been irritated in their own way, but being open with your CPS worker and your fosters and adopted parents. Because if I was more open with my CPS worker, I probably wouldn't have been with the family that I was today.
Hmm.
I Because the CPS worker, you also have to see their side. She had 5 children to be adopted. Like that's a lot of children, and we were all older, and I was a teenager when I was up for
Well, and
adoption.
sometimes what I like to tell children or kids that are in this situation is
Mhm.
you have to advocate for yourself a lot of the times. You have, if things worked properly all the time, then CPS would recognize those things. But the biggest thing is we need to teach our children to advocate for themselves. I think that is
Mhm.
very big.
Yep. Yep. It's super big. And I bet you, seeing the CPS side, she had 5 children to be adopted. That's a lot of work. Just trying to find the families for one child is crazy enough, and making
Mhm.
sure they're the right family. But 5, that's a lot.
Right.
And when I was in foster care, being separated from my twin, and that was a court decision, and part of it was my decision because I wanted to be on my own. But those were and I personally would say my decision probably wasn't that big of a decision than the court. Um, but being separated and having these 5 children to be adopted was a lot of work. So seeing her side and being stressed, she probably didn't see the things that were going on with me. And when we had those meetings, she probably was focused on other things. So for the CPS, like when you really go visit a family and the child, be observant, like ask the right questions. Like you guys do a good job and you already have degrees and stuff like that. But being observant is probably the most thing, and seeing actions or if something's like off in the house a second time, or do you get what I'm saying? Because you can pick it up really easy if there's
Right.
something going on. And whether you're
So
together with the, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, not to cut you off, but how is your relationship with your siblings now? Do you
I keep
have a
in touch.
relationship with them?
I keep in touch with all of them because during the part where I was in high school and middle school, my parents forced me to stay away from them, forced me to stay away. That was blood, basically. Like I was attached to them through like biological blood or anything. Um, it was really hard. I felt like I was literally alone when I during high school, my mission. I felt like I was alone, and so it was hard. But after that, when I became an adult, I chose to keep in touch with them. Yeah, I kept boundaries because they had boundaries too, and they're not fully adults yet. And so I had to make sure it was okay with the adopted parents too, making sure that I set boundaries with the adopted parents and being respectful of that because those are their parents. And I have great relationships with them because I respect their boundaries and they respect mine, and we enjoy time and we make it fun because with all the things that we went through, we need to have fun in our lives. And that was something that was hard. I never really had fun in high school or anything because I was so miserable and wasn't
Right.
happy. And I was living a lifestyle that my parents chose and it wasn't mine. And so that was one thing. And with this whole message, like, yeah, I talked about a lot of things that were like very off-putting or a different opinion. But the last thing is follow your heart, follow your dreams, and always make sure that you are happy, no matter
Right.
what. And I know you probably still have a few more questions I can answer, but that is my motto: is follow your dreams and follow your heart. Make sure that you're happy.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
actually, that is all my questions, and I really appreciate you being willing to visit with me. And I'm glad
Mhm.
things are looking up for you. And I do know your other siblings, and so grateful that they are in a good home.
Mhm.
And I'm just glad things are, and I'm glad I got to meet your husband not long
Yeah.
ago. So that
Thanks.
was really nice. But I'm glad to see you doing better, and I really appreciate you coming on here.
Of course. Thank you.
All
Thanks
right,
for letting me
we'll
be
talk.
able to talk about my story, even though like I didn't go into detail on some things,
Yeah,
um, but I'm happy to be able to tell my story and help people out.
yeah, I appreciate you. And hopefully we'll do another interview.
Of course. All
Hey,
right.
have a good day. Thank you.
Yep, of course.